Hey everyone, my name is Benj Heisch. I'm a wedding and elopement photographer based in the Pacific Northwest. And today we're talking about another camera that has a lot of personal significance to me. It's a camera that I actually don't use nearly as often as I probably should. And I've actually rarely used it for professional use, but it is a camera that I take with me for a lot of my personal work. And that is the Nikon F2. So while photography wasn't actually as big a part of my childhood as you might think, seeing how my uncle's Hasselblad is now mine, and this Nikon F2 is actually my dad's, we didn't actually use this stuff that often. I feel like I remember a few specific times where my dad would use this camera. I can think back to specific photos of my brother playing soccer that he took with it. And he always told me about photos that he took with this camera or maybe one of his other Nikons of Elton John at a concert and stuff like that back in the day. But one of the things as I was starting to sort of get into photography was that he had this Nikon setup, which included multiple lenses and just a bunch of really cool stuff. And I'm not gonna lie, I definitely considered eBaying out all of this equipment and all of this gear, but then sort of decided against it once I realized how little I was going to end up getting for it, which obviously now about 12, 13, 14 years later, I'm very, very thankful I didn't make that very, very stupid decision. So I definitely used this camera a little bit kind of as I was starting my whole photography and especially film journey. But the thing that really started making me use this camera a lot was actually having a kid of my own and wanting to kind of put that, legacy forward in taking photos with the same camera that, I had photos of myself taken of when I was a kid. And then sort of the bonus part of all that is it's actually a really remarkably advanced camera. This camera came out in the early 70s, but actually has a lot of really good features, like the shutter speed goes all the way up to 1/2000th of a second, which is 1/1000th of a second faster than my Leicas. It has a built-in, well, I guess it doesn't have a built-in meter, but the meter is on this prism. So this prism finder has a specific meter. And as you kind of work, apologies for the audio here, but as you move your aperture, it actually displays in the viewfinder, and you can also see your shutter speed change as you move this through the viewfinder. You have your negative and positive, and you kind of see where your proper exposure would be, and that is just so far beyond what like my Leica M6 has with two singular little pointers for exposure. It's also incredibly well made. Like, this thing is built like a tank. It's a little bit bulkier, but if you compare the size of this little camera to a DSLR, which I oddly have right here because I was borrowing it from my sister-in-law, the difference between a 5D Mark III and a Nikon F2 is like fairly staggering. So the idea that back in the day, these DSLRs or SLRs as they were before they were digital, they were quite a bit smaller. And so now, the difference between this and like a Leica M6 is actually not that far off. The other thing that I had always sort of heard from my dad about this camera specifically was that the lenses were pretty extraordinary. He would always brag about these Nikkor lenses and this Nikkor glass being amazing. And the thing about it is it's actually pretty legit. If you've watched any of my videos, including this one, as I assume I'm going to be shooting some B-roll, I shoot all of my kind of macro B-roll with this Nikkor. It's a micro 55 f3.5. and it's really sharp even for modern day stuff. If you're in the market for a macro lens of any kind and you don't actually want to spend the ridiculous amounts of money, it's probably more than this now, but the last time I checked, this lens was able to be found on eBay for about 50 bucks. You know, finding a lens like this that's, I don't even know how much, like 40 plus years old, but I just bought a really cheap adapter. I use it on the EOS R all the time. The main lenses that I've sort of pulled out of this kit that fit my style really well are this 24mm f2.8, as well as the 55 f3.5 macro, or micro as the lens is deemed. But then I picked up this, you know, Pancake 51.8, and for just general purpose, going around taking family photos and stuff like that, this lens, especially for the size, is really great. I don't really have a ton of issues with it. Especially if you're someone that wants a really good classic film camera and might not either like rangefinders or want to pay the Leica tax. I think this Nikon F2, and then you know, a lot of people really rave for days about the F3, would probably be a really great addition to a lot of people's kit. This thing just has so many cool features. It has flash sync ports, a frame counter here. You know, the meter for me has always been really accurate and I've had no issues with that. It has a self timer. There's just so many things about this camera that are amazing and just rock solid. I've taken it to a few weddings, and especially when my widest lens was a 35mm on my digital stuff, I would take this camera just to shoot the 24. It's definitely soft on the edges, wide open, but overall it's a really, really great camera, and I have been really fortunate to been sort of given this, even though, you know, I don't think my brothers really are gonna care about it nearly as much as I do, but I shoot this camera all the time, and especially some of my favorite photos ever of my son in the first few years of his life were taken on this. And I don't know, man, there's just something really cool about having a sort of generational piece. I'm not like a big, super weird sentimental person with objects, but there's definitely something about like holding that Hasselblad of my uncle's and being able to shoot with my dad's Nikon F2, and then especially pairing that with me photographing, you know, photos of my own kid and my own life. I think it was really weighing heavy on me, especially within the first couple months of my son's life. I carried this camera and this macro lens around so much to take, you know, just close-up photos of my son, and just thinking through a lot of what the legacy behind the camera itself means to me. And then even if he doesn't really care about this camera and my, you know, any future kids care about it, I'll know that, you know, the photos that I took of him, especially within the first few weeks of his life, a lot of them were taken with his grandpa's camera. There's going to be something sappy about it. There just is. But the cool thing for me definitely is that I do have a super emotional attachment to this camera. And thankfully, it's actually a really quality piece of equipment that really does kind of allow me to do really cool things with. So thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want me to make more videos like this, especially about maybe not as popular film cameras, I do have plenty and would love to talk more about them because I'm just kind of a nerd about that. Please like and subscribe to this channel. It really does, again, help push this stuff forward, get this stuff out there, and the more, I don't know, seriously people take me doing these videos, the more likely I'm gonna be able to make a lot more of them. It's something I do really, really enjoy, and for me, it ends up being something that I can sort of give back to the community because a lot of people who I really admire and follow have given me a ton of information. You know, the amount of Matt Day videos I've watched in my lifetime has been significant, so I'm definitely trying to kind of do a similar thing in just being helpful to other people out there. So if you like this video, that would be super helpful to me. So thanks again, and I would just give a sort of mini challenge to anybody that's out there, whether you have a film camera or a really cool, you know, trendy new digital camera or whatever it might be, or if you just have a smartphone, I would just implore you to make sure that you're documenting your own life well. You know, take photos of your friends, family, take videos, whatever it might be. I do think that that is just something, I mean, obviously I'm a photographer, but it's obviously something that is incredibly important to me. And the more that life kind of goes on, the more you realize how many photos you wish you would have taken, or how many more photos you wish you would have taken at least. Anyways, thanks again, and I will see you guys on the next one.